This goes to the point that both Cody and Roman made about, I think we were all alluding to, which is that finding that connective tissue between strategies and schemes that work really well for you.
Howdy, folks. This could be the meatiest episode we've put out yet. We've got Cody, Roman, and Robert, three people that have been on the show before, and we cover a lot of topics. We talk about Gaining Ground Zero and the different formats that were outlined there, and get into a discussion about banning master hiring. We learn how each of them approach a pool from crew building. So how do they go from looking at the pool to deciding on a keyword and then building out the crew? There's some really neat tricks that they give that you dirty arcanists are going to love on how you can be real sneaky with the deliver a message scheme. We talk about models that might need some attention, some that may be overcosted or even undercosted. There's a really good segment on taking your play to the next level and how to get there. We finish off with some sound advice on managing resources for success. Bottom line, even if you have to listen to this episode twice, it's worth it, and I guarantee you're going to be a better player because of it. Enjoy.
Playing a tabletop strategy game allows you to unplug and test your skills against friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars delivers useful strategies, discussions, battle reports, and reviews to tabletop games like Malifaux. If you want to get better at the games you already play, or discover the games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the Third Floor. Today we've got three guests and a ton of Malifaux topics to discuss. Now, if you did not listen to our first roundtable, I'll have a link for it in the show notes. This is our second roundtable with three new guests. A lot going on. We're a couple months after release. Gaining Grounds Zero has been out for a little while. And there's been a lot of activity on AWP. So our first guest is Cody Hiatt. Now, Cody is currently in first place in the USFT national rankings. He has got 3 scored events, and he is placed first in all 3, including his big win at Nova to kind of start off the season. But you may also likely know him from his really good Terra Deep Dive episode, which I'll have linked to the notes. Our second guest is Roman Hechenberger, and he's out of the Great Lakes Conference. You probably know him from his outstanding Colette Deep Dive episode. And our third guest is Robert Singer. He's also out of the Great Lakes Conference, and you've heard him both on the McCabe and the Rasputina Deep Dive episodes. Again, links to all of those are in the show notes. So here, guys, I've put together kind of a list of topics for us. But before we kind of launch into talking foe, Cody, what have you been up to? Welcome back to the Third Floor.
Thanks for having me, man. Shout out to the floor heads. What up? Sound off in the comments. Let them know we are Legion.
Then the other news, of course, is that we're going to be losing you here out of the Carolinas Conference. You're going to be moving down to the Southeast Conference and be playing out of Florida.
Yeah.
So we've already saw a little conversation going with some people playing out of Jacksonville, but you're going to be down in South Florida. And I lived down there, Cody, for about 7 years. And even for 40K, it was tough to find a game.
Yeah. I used to play War Machine and 40K down there. It's rough. So I'll be irrelevant when I move down there, and you want to have me back on. That's good.
Oh, that's good. We can have other guests, which would be nice. But for those of you that are listening, if you're in Florida, let's make sure that we can get Cody some games so that when he moves down here in a couple months, he doesn't get too rusty. Roman, welcome back to the Third Floor. What have you been up to?
Thanks for having me back, Craig. I've been hanging out in Indianapolis. Robert and I have been continuing to grow the scene here, and we're getting some players who are getting kind of scary as they are improving.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. Actually just finished a Zareta versus Rezer Yanlo game before coming on here tonight, and that ended in my favor, but it was closer than my opponent Jacob thought it was.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that saying that Yan Lo is the kind of the secret OP that people aren't talking about enough. And I've seen Yan Lo in the right hands. And if you've listened to Steve Bynum's deep dive on Yan Lo, you get a sense of how good he is. But he's not necessarily an easy master. He comes off initially as easy, and I don't think he is. But in the right hands, he's really good. And the fact that he went up against your Zareta and gave you a game says a lot.
Oh yeah, give him 5 more games with that to get really the movements and placement down. He's going to be a terror.
Yep, definitely. So Robert, welcome back to the third floor. What have you been up to, man?
Thank you. Well, the big thing was we had our first major event here in Indy, Slam of the Ram 2019. So we finished that up in October, and Roman actually came in second for that event. So that was our first U.S. Faux Tour event that was sanctioned, if you will.
Who came in first?
So first was Chris Short out of Ohio. Really great guy. He actually won it last year. Actually, the fun thing is, so Slam at the Ram we've done for years. It started out with War Machine, but has turned into Malifaux. And last year and this year, we had the exact same podium in the exact same spots.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the player, not the models, that might determine the results.
Well, and Roman did played 2 different factions last year to this year, and I mean, obviously, an edition changed and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the only person who kind of repeated faction was actually our first place winner, Chris, played Bayou both years. So
very nice.
Yep.
Very, very nice.
Yeah. So that was a good event. And otherwise, I also played somebody who I think is also 2 other masters that I think are sneaky OP right now, which are I played Sandeep tonight against Von Stuck.
Both of those are good masters.
Yes.
You're going to hear, I think people steer away from Sandeep because of last edition, and they haven't jumped on him yet. You're going to start seeing more people put Sandeep on the table. We're going to start hearing some noise, and Von Stuck there's going to be a lot of conversations happening as people put together that box and get it on the table.
He is awesome. And Sandeep, I've been playing a lot in the last several months. And yeah, I think it's the exact same thing that people have fatigue from him, even playing as him from the last edition. But in some ways, I think for this edition, he's honestly even better. Like, you're not going to take him in everything, but he can be taken into everything.
Yeah, he's different. Yeah, he's different. I don't want to turn this into a Sandeep podcast, but no. I don't think you're wrong, Robert. I don't think you're wrong. I think he potentially is as good. The only thing I'll add to that is I think that we've had a rising tide with all masters. So I don't know if he's going to dominate and take over the faction the way he did last time. But he's not worse. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he takes over the faction. Arcanists kind of have it pretty great because we are the best faction.
Oh, do they? Really?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, no, you and I agree on that. So, guys, let's launch into our first topic. And, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is going to be some hot topics that, things have been discussed. I also want to get into some thinking because I consider all 3 of you very good players and even more importantly, good thinkers on the game. So I want to kind of pick your brains on some of your approaches. But let's start off with something that gets a lot of talk. And now with Gaining Ground Zero's out and the fact that we know that it's not being banned in Gaining Grounds, though there is a game mode where it can prevent it from happening. I want to talk about hiring masters. So here in North Carolina, I think we're pretty much committed to playing only singles, which means most of our events are just going to not allow us to hire masters. The UK has been on that boat for a long time, and they have banned hiring masters. And Cody, you and I have had a couple discussions about this. So I want to start off with you. What are your thoughts about, in competitive play specifically, whether people should have tournaments that is a non-singles tournament, which means they can hire masters?
In that last roundtable discussion, I think you guys had a really good conversation on this. And Doxy and Varney, to sort of summarize, Doxy and Varney thought it was bad because it sort of hurts internal faction balance, and that you want to if certain masters are OP or you can serve certain roles in certain strats, especially, that they're going to be ubiquitous. And I think that's a good point. And it's a point that you could also make about certain versatile models. Like editing.
Say it out loud. Say it out loud.
This was Craig ranted for 5 minutes, and that was cut out of this podcast about the Soulstone miner. But we had to cut that out.
That's funny.
Yeah. So,
your point is good. Your point is good, Cody. That you could make the same discussion and subtract out master and talk about certain versatile models. But keep going with your thoughts.
But I think the point that's missed when this discussion happens is the potential harm to external faction balance if you're limiting hiring options. Like, just from a game design perspective, this is supposed to be a perfectly imbalanced game, right? That balance occurs because multiple options exist, right? If something's meta, if something's strong, then there should be obvious counters for that within other factions, and that's how balance sort of occurs. And I think whenever you're limiting hiring options, you are potentially hurting the external faction balance that exists within the game. And you can easily see that with, like, the most obvious example is Zoraida. Like, everyone's complaining about second master Zoraida. And guess who really benefits from singles format?
Ooh, I know. Zoraida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't obey masters, so they're a decent little tech pick into her. But then as soon as you ban that because she's maybe overtly powerful in the second master role, you're sort of hurting the other factions that can't bring her.
I think that's very, very valid. Robert, what is your thoughts?
It was kind of jumping off of what Cody was saying towards the end about, faction balance and also tech, picking for tech, right? So Zoraida is, a supposedly meta dominant master right now. Well, not only, I've kind of theorized lists, but I've also played a list into Zoraida that included 3 masters, and it shut her down. She still could do a lot of what Zoraida does by, probably what she was a little bit more designed to do, which is exponentially increase the effectiveness of her own models. But it did shut down the fact that, hey, because I've got, these 3 guild masters, you're not going to be obeying everything left and right. And one of them I might be able to get in your face, right? And so I think that even to Cody's point also about versatile models is that, honestly, even taking one master in or is, to me, the same as taking Archie, who is way cheaper. Right? Archie is a model who so many Reser players are taking, who is non-versatile because of his cost and what he can bring to the game. And if Archie can throw off, I think, the balance by jumping into, let's say, Yamlo, as we've heard it described on the show, that's incredibly powerful. So to be upset that somebody else is taking Seamus, who costs a lot more, I think is just kind of a silly argument when you have all these other models that you can take in that are also going to throw things off in a big way.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, Robert. The only thing I'll throw as a potential counter to that is that two wrongs don't make a right. No. And I do think, for instance, Archie is a model that could be rebalanced a little bit points wise, but it is the sort of thing that, if you're I think you're limiting. And I also think that with those, it's expensive to hire a master. So you're really paying for that in a big, big way. And I think that it shows up on the table when you do, because you are limited in your choices and your decision making, because you are definitely going to be having to play a much different game than your opponent. Because sometimes you're going to be sitting with 5 or 6 models as opposed to 8.
And I think the cost part is a very important part of the discussion. It's like we already have a mechanism that Weird has thought about for balancing second masters. Like, the costs exist, the leader only abilities already exist. So it's clear that they have thought about them in a balance perspective. And I see like this phrase thrown around AWP a lot, which is they aren't balanced for competitive play, but that they have a mechanism for balancing. It's not like it was not part of the beta. So I think that's a little bit of a lie. Yeah. And it's what I see a lot. And I think, and if I had to hard sell second masters for two reasons that isn't related to game balance or whatever. The first of all is the one that really sort of made me fall on this side of the argument is when we locally started talking about banning them, even though they weren't banned by the company. And by doing that, we're sort of creating a little kiddie pool for ourselves. And when I want to go to Adepticon, the USFT finals is not going to be single format, I might get wiped by Second Master Karai or something like that because of this sort of artificial comp that we've applied to the system. And the second point I want to say is I think that Second Masters is good for new players because it's very easy entry point to, I bought 2 crew boxes. I know how to play one master. I want to learn a second one. Well, I'll just throw them in there. That's how I started learning third. Like when the beta came out, I'm like, oh, well, why learn 4 models when I can learn 1?
Yeah. And I mean, I've gone back and forth on it, Cody, but you brought up a dirty word for me, which is comp. I'm not a huge fan of localized comp. And when you realize that if you're artificially labeling and restricting like that, that's essentially what you're doing. It's a little bit different now that we have it in Gaining Grounds. But is it really that different? What were you thinking, Roman?
So, in addition to all these excellent points, especially that last one, Cody, I hadn't thought of it that way. Another thing to consider is there are certain places where bringing the second master, think of them, any model is a tool, and we've all noticed that this edition is very much bring the right tool for the job, and a big part of that is what tools do you need to tech against the opposing master. And there's definitely some where you need something to bring. For instance, tonight, going against Jan, I knew I needed something that could ignore armor. And I ended up being stupid about that and didn't bring Serena Bowman like I should have, but it worked out. Whereas if I'd thought about it, I probably could have brought in Dreamer as a second master who has the ignoring armor attack, plus can summon more models with that in. Second point to add on to that is this is another aspect of it as a new edition. This is something that, as Cody pointed out, this is something we're designed for it. And honestly, the argument of it's not balanced for competitive play, maybe that wasn't the idea, but I also agree with what Matt said of it's cool that you can do this, and it's not going to be a prime point. It's not going to be the most effective use of your stones to bring in a master all the time, assuming all the masters are costed correctly. And I think the issues we've been seeing of Zoraida, and most of the time the and, when I've heard of it, is Dreamer. And Dreamer is cheap because Chompy is a big totem, but Dreamer is also a summoner. I think one way they could easily fix this is to bring Dreamer's cost up a little bit. And even if they don't, another great, instead of banning second masters, in Gaining Grounds, there is a different play style of bans, which allows you, after masters have been picked, to say, hey, opponent, you can't bring X keyword unless it's a versatile model. And I think that is a perfect way to deal with this.
Well, and there's a weird, and maybe one of you guys can help me out here, but I hear people saying that, Weird did not intend double masters to be for competitive play. And I have yet to figure out where people are getting that from. Was that stated somewhere and I missed it? Or did somebody misinterpret Matt when he was on the podcast? Because I've never heard that before from Weird.
Yeah, what was balance for competitive play?
Yeah.
Yeah, Craig, I think where people heard that or started to get it in their head was just misinterpreting what Matt said on your podcast. I think
that's what I was thought too.
If I recall correctly, Matt essentially said that it's something that you're not necessarily going to do all the time. And he is absolutely right. Even the amount of games that I've played since 3E started and since beta, it's probably only been about 15 to 20% of my games where I've taken multiple masters. But each time it has made a difference, but it hasn't been, for myself or really anybody in the community, something that any of us consider game breaking. And I think something that I definitely recall as well is the fact that Mason asked during the playtest for a lot of data on it, and they never said throughout, this is not something balanced for competitive play.
Yeah, I think that's become a weird urban legend, and I was afraid that the Matt interview might have given the seeds for that. But I think Cody's point is right. That we have a lever, and that's the cost on the master. That can help do it, and by stripping it out, there's a strong argument that you're creating more imbalance elsewhere. So I think all of that's valid.
Well, yeah, and something that I will also say to that as far as balance is, can you name a faction where you can't take a second master or a third?
Explorers.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair, totally fair. But it is going to become a faction where you can, right? Everybody has access to this, and some things are going to be better than others. And those are things that I still think can be addressed. Like, as Roman said, bans was something that we were talking about in our meta recently this week as, honestly, what I think is the better fix to this, right? Is if you do bans where, yes, you can take another master, but if somebody's really afraid of Seamus coming and doing his whole Seamus, dickish thing, like, say, no Red Chapel, right? But that's not going to stop somebody from taking Kirai then and summoning all over you, and doing whatever they need to do. So, I mean, there's still going to be benefits. So, against an Everborn player, and I'm going up against Dreamer, I can say no Zoraida, right? Or no Swamp Fiend. And doesn't mean that they can't, just take Nekema if they want somebody that's just going to murder everything.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong about that. And the only thing that makes bans a little tough is it's not new player friendly, because you need a little bit of a deep bench in order to be able to adjust to a ban. But overall, I love the idea of the format.
You just sold me on the ban format, because the one thing I've been wrestling with this conversation has been what Pete brought up on the Shenlong episode, where he's basically saying that the uncouth aspect of second masters is that they could be a surprise. But I think, just as sort of to give a little timestamp to this podcast, the English or GT was last weekend, and the winner was a guy who, the UK Nationals. The winner was a guy who brought in a bunch of versatiles and out of keyword models, and you could argue that was just as big as a surprise. So if you're going to have a feels bad moment, it's going to be either at list reveal or at master reveal. At least if it's at list reveal, there's a little bit of a mind exercise that exists with sort of, what is he going to bring? Oh, what should I bring? Instead of the coin flip at master reveal. And then if you add bans, that even adds another additional pre-game game that's at least more interesting than the master declaration phase.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm already considering for the Masters for USFT that ban might be a really cool format for that.
I agree. I think it's the kind of thing that anybody who, whether they're top player or, middling, is going to appreciate, right? Because it adds something for everybody, no matter your skill level.
And the idea is that we're going to have all experienced players there. It's all, people that are the best in their conference, and, they should have access to at least 3 different keywords. So they should be able to make those adjustments.
And ultimately, it gets a happy medium between we want to play with our toys, but we also want to have it be fair as fair can be, I guess. So in this case, you're going, okay, don't bring the most broken thing, but bring something else if you need to.
Yep, and it could ultimately force us to be better players. Yeah, I think the only thing that makes me not want to advocate bans for every tournament is, like I said, the fact that it does punish somebody who just has a crew box and a couple other models, and really doesn't have that. But I don't know. I mean, do they really even have access to a second keyword? I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. Guys, let's take a quick break, and when we get back from the break, I want to shift gears off of kind of a hot topic discussion and get in more to kind of approach to the game. So I want to talk to you guys about when you see a pool, what is your thought process that you go through for picking a keyword, building for that pool, and then what is your thought process when you eventually are picking your scheme? So we'll be right back.
Hi there, this is Owen from the Nova Open, and I am a $5 patron of Third Floor Wars because I love supporting the whole Malifaux community. I want to help Craig and the whole Third Floor Wars team continue making the fantastic content that gets me through my daily commute. You should join me in supporting the show. Just pause this episode, head to patreon.com and search Third Floor Wars, or grab the link in the show notes. See you there.
So I think one of the things that makes Malifaux very unique is the concept of the pools. I think it's one of the things that all of us really love about the game. But I also think it's a place where newer players or players that are losing on a consistent basis struggle. I know I struggle with it. So what I want to do is kind of talk these guys through and get them to kind of talk out loud about how they approach a pool. So the pool I'm going to give them is the pool that we're going to use in an upcoming live stream. And depending on when this is released, that live stream is in early December. But here's the pool. It's a wedge reckoning game, and the schemes are take prisoner, detonate the charges, deliver a message, hold up their forces, and break through. Now, Robert, when you see this pool, and you got this pool before we started recording, can you kind of walk us through, talking out loud, what your thought process is, starting with what keyword for you, for an Arcanist, you would pick and why?
So the first thing, at least for if I know I'm doing Arcanist, I'm going to look at the strategy and think of which masters or keywords that I have that I know can compete in Reckoning, right? And so for the ones that I have right now, honestly, it's pretty good across the board, right? I think Sandeep can do some nice competition in Reckoning because he can bring multiple golems into the fight in unexpected places. I think Rasputina can definitely do Reckoning because she's got the double threat of Ice Golem plus Blessed of December plus her and the Silent One's ranged attacks. Karis also being kind of the in-your-face beater extraordinaire for Arcanist, so that there are a lot of options there. Where I start to take a deeper look, right, after I've kind of pared it down, is which schemes do I think I can accomplish fairly easily regardless of who my opponent plays. And that's something that I kind of approach every time I go in is, okay, what are my scheme options that if I just going into it, I know that I have the ability to have a leg up or be able to score at the very least the first point, but hopefully both points pretty easily.
So taking it up to a bit of a higher level, Robert. So when you look at the schemes, do you try to bunch them together? Like how do you work through that? Deciding, these are schemes that I think, tell me this keyword, or are you thinking denial as well? Like walk us through kind of the higher level thought process.
Yeah. So there's a few things. One, I think about action economy. In this particular pool here, so wedge, reckoning, take prisoner, detonate charges, deliver message, hold up their forces, breakthrough. One thing that stands out to me is that there's not a ton here that screams for a lot of scheme markers, right? So that tells me I don't necessarily need to have scheme markers being dropped left and right. I need to be very strategic with it if I decide to go with breakthrough or detonate charges or even deliver a message, right? I'm placing certain amounts. If I decide to go with detonate charges, that's something that I especially look for things that are going to be mobile enough or tricksy enough to get multiple scheme markers out near that model, because the distances can be, of course, very tricky because you have the limit of the 4 inches on dropping a scheme marker, right? Mm-hmm. With the interact action. So that's something that I look at first, right? Is like, okay, how much time, how many activations, how many resources am I going to have to spend to accomplish that? That especially becomes more and more apparent with some of the others. Reckoning, it's a little bit easier, right? There are models that I have within the faction, and it's really any faction, where you can look at and say, okay, I can kill a minion pretty easily with this, or I can kill 2 minions on turn 3 with this, and that sort of thing. And Reckoning, we've all kind of, and you've discussed on the show a lot, how it's kind of one of the lesser less high scoring of the strategies, because there's a lot more denial. It's a lot more difficult to kill models just outright in this edition. But if I'm thinking of something like plant explosives, that's one where I'm really, really, really thinking about, okay, I need to have enough actions to drop my explosive markers to stay up on my opponent, while also having enough to deny my opponent by either killing their models or picking up their markers. And if it's a scheme-heavy pool, I need to be able to have enough actions to drop the amount of scheme markers I need to get. So I really think about the amount of actions and how much time, how many cards or stones I'm going to have to invest, and honestly, how much thinking I'm going to have to do. If I'm sitting there pondering for like 10 minutes on like the right, moves that I need to make because I'm in a tough spot, then I probably chose an incorrect scheme into whoever I'm playing against.
You're saying that deliberation that you're having to go through in-game is not a result of your in-game state, but a mistake that was made before the game even started.
It can be a little bit of both, right? So if I make the decision that I'm going to go all in with my list, right, initially, but part of it is that when you're list building, you are teching against your opponent, right?
Yep.
So if the question is like at the start, before I know who my opponent is, if I'm looking at this for a tournament and I just know, okay, these are the 3 different encounters, I'm going to think about taking these schemes, but it's going to depend on the opponent, right? So I think that's another piece of it, is that once I know who my opponent is, which faction and which master they're bringing as well, that plays a major role in what I'm taking. And that's why you decide officially on your schemes until after both your lists have been revealed, right? Because things like Vendetta and other things would be incredibly tricky to determine. I can tell you, and I can walk you through this process of looking at this pool, not knowing who my opponent is. There are a couple things that stand out as far as what I would probably go with. With it being Wedge, I probably would go with Breakthrough. And I would probably go with Deliver a Message. And I would take that either with Sandeep or Rasputina.
Very cool. Roman, how much is your approach different from a theory, high level standpoint? How much aligns with Robert, and is there anything else you can add?
So I definitely broadly agree with what Robert's saying. That's not the first thing I focus on. The first thing I look at before I even consider faction all the time, depending on, if you have your pool before your actual playing that night or whatever, I will look at it and go, okay, what is the strategy and what schemes either slot in nicely with that strategy versus what actively work against it? So like, for instance, with this one, I'm immediately looking at, this is Reckoning. Take prisoner and deliver a message and hold up their forces all require me to leave something alive, which is counter to Reckoning. Right. On paper, anyway. However, I also know that Reckoning tends to be more of a hold on and finally kill something because everybody's bringing their tough nuts to crack. So looking at this, at that point is when I start looking at it as Robert mentioned, of what is your action economy? What tools do you need to bring to do a specific thing? Because I completely agree. And while it's not a surprise that Robert mentioned Rasputina, because that's his girl. I completely agree, not only with choice of her, but also in the schemes that he picked. My counter looking at that would be, I would think possibly Mei Fang, because not only is she mobile and can both survive and lay down a hurting, she's going to fairly easily hold up their forces with a couple of any of her minions, because they're cheap and really hard to remove for minions, especially in Arcanists, for 4 and 5 stone minions. With those, they actually open up a possibility of take prisoner. Not that I would bring it for exactly the reason with Reckoning, but I think I would bring Mei with a couple Gammon and a couple of her rail workers, do hold up their forces and quite probably deliver a message, depending on what I'm facing. Because that's the other trick that I look at. I kind of, as I'm looking at a pool, look and find, okay, what are 3-ish of the schemes that I want to do? Can pretty easily do with this crew. And then depending on the faction named against me, based on the masters and crews in that faction, which one am I more expecting to do and what might be an off throw to throw the player off versus what might be a good bluff. And then once I see the schemes, I'll narrow it down past those 3 to the final 2.
One thing I want to add to that, and it goes back to a little bit why deliver a message. I know deliver a message seems a little weird to take in a Rasputina crew, especially how to score those points. But the reason is that Roman and I discovered something about her and Zoraida and Sandeep with deliver a message, which is the fact that they can draw their range even for deliver a message through either with Rasputina, her ice pillars, through academics with Sandeep, or swamp fiends with Zoraida. Because the actual way that the rules for range are written allows, even when they're drawing range for something such as doing their interact, and the wording of it actually makes that usable. And so again, that comes down to what's easy, what's conducive. I can pull off deliver a message pretty easily if I just have to keep your master alive, but I can kill your henchman with reckoning, going back to Roman's point, and I don't have to put a lot of effort into getting my ice pillar and an interact out there, whether it's with a silent one or with a Rasputina. That's an easy, quick point for me that I did not have to invest much time, energy, or resources into. And then I can start focusing on the harder stuff.
Right, exactly. And we're really talking about 2 phases here, right? And one of the things that we'll talk about here in just a little bit is, actually picking the schemes and scoring them. But your point is well said, which is, we're now building. We still we have an idea of what schemes we might pick, but we don't know for sure because we still haven't seen the opposing crew, and that could have a huge influence on it. Cody, when I built this for the live stream, one of the things that I did purposefully is try to build a pool that did not dictate where on the board the action was going to happen. For you, would that influence your build at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at this in particular, I think deployment sometimes decides my master selection way more than the actual schemes. Like they mentioned before, I think the best sort of strategy is to start strat and then work your way down to specifics. So for example, I'm an outcast player, so Wedge Reckoning, I'm probably taking Levy or Von Schill. With B tier is probably Hamlin or Parker. And it's Wedge, so that means all your valuable AP is going to go at the front of the corner, so it's going to force the action in the center of the board, just by the nature of the deployment. And then you got Breakthrough, and which kind of forces people to spread out. But overall, most of the pool sort of makes me think we're going to fight in the middle. And so that's why I wouldn't bring Parker. Even though I might bring Parker into Reckoning, I would much prefer to play him into Wedge or corner, where I can sit on the flanks and lose no AP attack action-wise, versus someone like Levy who might want to walk in charge with certain models. And then from there, I usually look for, and before I go to that, I guess for your newer players, a useful heuristic, if I could just get specific about Reckoning, is to add up the amount of points that your lists have that contribute to Reckoning. So the Masters are 3, Henchmen are 2, Minions are 1. Like one of our local Dannies told me, like as close as you can get to 11 is probably like a good strategy for Reckoning.
Yeah.
And that takes certain masters off the board for me. Like Zip is like a pretty good killy master, but he's bringing all these extra points because a lot of the power is in his henchman and he has a significant totem. So those things definitely contribute.
Completely agree. So let's shift gears a little bit now. So we've kind of walked through our approach at this point. The only thing that we've really known is what the opposing master and keyword is going to be. But now you're able to see the opposing list, Cody. So walk me through, now that you've got all the information, you know the terrain, you know your list, you know their list, you know the pool, obviously. What is the thought process or the levels you work through as you determine what schemes you're going to choose?
Okay, so when I build my list before we get to that step, I usually pick pick a list that's going to have some quote unquote free points. And by free points, I basically mean I can score a scheme. Like say I draw 2 Severes and I get activation control. I can score a scheme and you can't stop me. So I don't like things like claim jump, or like vendetta, all of these things that are really specific that if your opponent just accidentally does something, they can stop me.
Yep.
So like looking at this pool, if I bring, let's say I brought Von Schill because he kind of has free points with Take Prisoner because of his pull trigger. And Detonate Charges is kind of free points for Prospectors. So I might bring some of those because I have good henchmen. And Deliver a Message, the first point is free. The second point is impossible. Hold Up is very hard because that's like a summoner scheme. And I'm not playing summoners in Reckoning. And Breakthrough is also very hard for Outcasts, easy for Filthy Arcanists and stuff like that. So usually I built my crew going in knowing that here are my tier of schemes. Like Take Prisoner and Detonate, I know I can score 4 points if things go my way on those two. And then Deliver a Message is kind of B tier because that's, like I said, first point is free, second point is very difficult. So that one I'll take a lot of the times as more of a respect pick, meaning if I think the game is going to be close, I'd rather have the 1 free point than to spend all of my AP trying to get 2 points on a different one.
What would you have to see in the other list, though, that would change that thought process? So you kind of narrowed down your picks a little bit. What would you see on the other side of the table to go, you know what? I kind of thought this was the right play, but I'm going to have to go a different direction.
Specific tech. I mean, like from an Outcast perspective, let's say I play, I pick Von Schill, they declare Parker, who eats scheme markers. Now Detonate is going to be very difficult. So maybe I'll audible off a Detonate. If they have models that can't be placed or moved by enemy effects, like I can't remember the name of that ability, that Monaco lady has it. Then I might audible off of Take Prisoner, depending on the abundance of those effects, and just go for the things where I can get my 1 point out of and then play for the strat.
Yeah. Now, Roman, in that situation, obviously asking the right question when you see the other list, unless you have full familiarity, is probably pretty important.
Oh, entirely. You got to know what you need to ask, not only for your list, like if you're bringing someone like Colette, who has very specific things she worries about, you not only have to know that question, but also, hey, do you have ways of turning off, like Cody was saying, ways to reposition enemy models? Do you have ways of moving at the end of the turn? Because it doesn't matter even if you have a not Steam Fitter, Union Miner. If someone has a way to push at the end of the turn, like Deadly Pursuit, you're not going to get it on that model unless you get lucky and that player forgets.
Right. Or it's potential that they're going to use it against you to get themselves into the position you thought you were safe from. Yeah. So outside of what, Cody talked about, is there any other advice that you can offer people when they're now at the point where all the decisions have been made as far as crew building, and they're trying to decide what schemes to take? Well, what kind of advice can you give some of the newer players or the players trying to get better?
A big part for me is, when are you going to score these? Because a big change from second ed to third ed is, since you can only score 1 point at a time, and you can only score the second point at the end of the game, especially in a time tournament setting where you don't know your opponent's acumen, maybe how often they play or how well they know how quickly they can play. I find myself going in a lot going, I need to be able to score at least one of my schemes turn 2, preferably both of them, so I can have a 3-point turn, and then immediately start turn 3, depending on where we are at the time on the game, immediately start setting up for the second point of all those, as well as trying to find time to deny the opponent. So it's kind of finding that tempo is the next thing you want to find. Is this something I can expect reasonably to get a point on early? Or if not get it early, deny it early.
Right. That makes sense. How about you, Robert?
So something else that I approach once we get to the point where I know who I'm playing against, I know their list, and I'm sitting there with the schemes, is everything that Cody and Roman said. I 100% agree with. Those are things that I do myself. One other thing that I'm sure that they do that hasn't been talked about yet is I also look at what my opponent is running and try and guess what schemes they might be doing and what things I know I can counter. And that's where a little bit of, as Cody mentioned, those free points, those are things that, are things that that you yourself can get really well and really easily. So if I'm playing this game and I'm going up against, let's say, McCabe, right? Or Tony, and I know, okay, with Tony, she can bring Union Miners. With McCabe, he can bring Hucksters. Those guys are going to just be able to easily score detonate charges unless I stop those models. So that tells me, okay, I know now what I need to target to try and prevent that. And gives me a little bit of an idea of, okay, I'm going to have to start thinking now also, where do I want to allocate resources that I think my opponent might go into? Because it's, again, the same thing for them. Those are the easy points that they would be able to score. How can I, or what am I using to deny it? So that goes into my decision making about which schemes I choose, because I want my schemes to have as little fuss and as little requirement as possible, so that I can focus on denying my opponent points. Because I think that's a huge part, that once you get to that next level play, really learning how to score what you need to score quickly and easily, while also denying your opponent the ability to score, is, I think, what really separates folks who are just getting into the game and just learning the game to the folks who are really deep into the sort of competitive play.
Yeah, I think a way to kickstart that process is to learn which of the schemes are very easy to deny when they're in the pool. So like I said, claim jump, it's very easy to save an activation to walk towards the center. Like if that's as long as you can walk towards the middle of the board, you can always deny that one. Same for assassinate. If you have any source of healing and you're debating, well, should I heal or should I walk? Should I take this attack action? If assassinate's in the pool and your master is 1 point below half, you can easily deny that. There are a lot. If you look through the schemes, when you sit down for a game, it'd be like, okay, if they do this and this and this, then that means they have this one, or this one.
Yeah. And I mean, I think honestly, to that point, also there's schemes that I look at and I just think, okay, my opponent probably will take this, because it is so easy for them to score. One of those, I think, across the board, I think a lot of people are noticing it at this point, is outflank, right? There's a lot of the time, depending on the deployment more than anything else, where you're kind of out of your mind if you don't take outflank, just because it's so easy for a lot of factions and a lot of keywords to score. And all you got to do is show up, because it doesn't even matter if somebody's right next to you. You're scoring those points. And so again, that's another thing where it's like, okay, I don't need to worry about it. I just need to worry about keeping it alive.
Well, and the thing about outflank too is, and this is something I think that we could have a whole episode about, is if there's outflank in the pool, it's so tempting, to your point, Robert, because all I have to do is show up. But if I see it in the pool and I've got a pretty good guess that my opponent's going to take it, well, guess what? I might take it anyway, because if I'm going to deny it, I'm going to have to be in those same places too. So now we're just going to battle it out.
Well, and one of my favorite combinations, honestly, with that is when Cursed Idols and Outflank, I think, is a pairing again. This goes to the point that both Cody and Roman made about, I think we were all alluding to, which is that finding that connective tissue between strategies and schemes that work really well for you. Well, if you got to show up anyway on the flanks for Outflank, and you've got the pool being Cursed Idols for your strategy, you might as well take it, because that you're just going to have two flanks that you're just going to be fighting over the whole game. And you have to remember that even though you may feel like, okay, you're spreading your force thin, your opponent is going to have to do the same to either deny you or to score points.
No, I agree. Roman, any last thoughts?
I was basically going to say exactly what Rob said about idols, but add to that also holds true, that outflank slots in really well with the strategy. also holds true for plant explosives because you have to spread out far enough to be able to drop all the bombs.
Well, yeah, and the other thing that kind of pairs, and I found this just recently in a game, what pairs well without flank? Harness the ley line.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there's certain efficiencies that I don't normally like Harness the Ley Line, but I had a game the other day and I'm like, couldn't find anything I liked other than outflank. And then I realized, you know what? I'm going to be there. Might as well drop a ski marker, and was able to score, for the first time in a long time, 4 points on my both schemes because I was able to pick up that efficiency. So I think that gives everybody kind of a good idea of how you guys approach things. And the last thing I'll add before we take a break here is that, listening to a podcast is great. Theory is great. I don't think any of these three gentlemen will argue with me that a lot of this is just experience. You've got to get out there. You got to play and you got to try them. And, there are schemes that you may have dismissed when you first saw the schemes for 3E and you just said that's garbage, or you heard on the podcast that's garbage. In a casual game, try taking that, because you're going to find that, like I did with Harness the Ley Line, that I never take harness, but it, did well for me when I realized that it paired well without flank. And I only figured that out because I tried it and I put it on the table. So guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get back more into kind of a hot topic. One of the things that has been blowing up weird places, the talk of certain masters potentially being overpowered, other models being underpowered. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on that entire thing. We'll be right back. Howdy friends, Craig here. With 3rd edition Malifaux released, it's time for you to get a new mat with new deployment zones. We've tried every mat in the business and nobody has better quality and selection than Mats by Mars. They're waterproof and they roll and unroll easily, and they're even wet erase Marco compatible. They offer over 35 designs and let you add M3EO overlays for making deployment and positioning a breeze. Check them out at matsbymars.com. They are offering a sweet discount for our listeners. After you found the perfect mat, use the promo code 3rd floor to get 10% off your entire order. If you really want to support us, in the notes of your order, request that our logo be put in the corner of your mat. It's the only way to make the best mat in the business even cooler. Again, that's Mat by Mars. Use the promo code 3rd floor to get a 10% discount. Details are in the show notes. All right, so we're going to get more into the kind of hot topics here, guys. I want to talk about some of the chatter that's been going on. There's been a lot of talk about certain masters that are top tier. They're a problem. Obviously, Shenlong, after the performance that we saw from that, and the people playing Shenlong in the UK Nationals, has created a lot of it. But we hear about Zareta, you hear about Molly. We talked at the beginning of the podcast about ones that we anticipate to hear noise about, like Albus. Cody, I don't want to talk about one of these specifically, but just in general, kind of this. What is your thoughts about the, this master is a problem, this needs a nerf, that needs a nerf? I know you grab your popcorn when you see those pop up on AWP, man. But walk me through what you're thinking.
So the first thing I'll say is that it's very easy to have like a knee-jerk reaction to tournament performance because of it's new and everyone is still like wearing their developer pants like Jared from Subway.
Yeah.
Right? They're way too big and we don't fit in them anymore and they need to just take them off. But we haven't got to that phrase because we're all playing in the beta just so recently ago. So it's very easy to be problem focused instead of solution focused about this stuff. But I think that makes you a worse player if you're not solution focused about issues whenever you play them in the game. Yeah, so I think that a lot of it needs more, a lot of reactions to this need more data. I will say, though, since we brought up Shenlong and we're talking about him because he's the flavor of the month baddie, before that it was Zoraida and then Molly and Lynch or whatever.
Right.
That if Shenlong ends up being the best master in the game, someone has to be the best master of the game. First of all, I'll just say that. Then I don't know if he is because I don't have the data or, I don't think it exists yet. But if Shenlong is the best master in the game, that's probably bad for the game. Just from a design perspective, the best master in the game probably shouldn't be the most face master, the guy who just, is overt and sort of a little bit point and clicky. When we were talking about Zoraida being the best master in the game, that sounds like a perfect meta because the control masters, just in my personal opinion, should be the best in the game. Because they require the most opponent knowledge, they require the highest skill level, and I think when your stat smashers are the best in the game, then maybe things should be addressed, and things will be addressed. Like Weird will address them eventually.
Yeah, and putting your 15th comment on the thread or doing it in all capital letters is not necessarily going to change Matt and Kyle's mind, but. It's a real interesting point about things are right when the control masters are the ones that are on the top. I hadn't thought about that, Cody. I got to digest that a little bit. My initial reaction is I agree with you because it does require the higher skill to be able to be good at those masters. Roman, what are your thoughts when you're seeing all this blow up on AWP?
Well, first off, as a lover of Control Masters, I think that Cody is my new best friend.
Right there with you, Roman.
Oh, Christ, I got 3 blue Magic players on the show.
Yeah, yeah, you do.
Everything is blue, but we'll get to that later.
Also, Darkness.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway, as far as the actual Masters various flavors of the month that we've seen, I'm going to go back to overall, throughout the beta, the designers have gotten most everything to a good spot.
I agree.
Things function like they're supposed to. They're flavorful. They're fluffy and fun while also being functional. That said, there are a few notable burrs that maybe need a little bit more fine grit sandpaper to get them to as comfortable as everything else is. And at the moment, I think what we're seeing are a couple of those burrs. Zoraida, I actually played her tonight to see if the changes, not to her, but to how the game functions in Gaining Grounds Season 0, changed her. And I think they got her just about right, because she's still very good as a control master. She's tricky to use well, but she's no longer, oh yes, it's idols or plant explosives. I'm going to bring her and win the game because I made that decision. That's not a problem anymore, so I think that burr is gone. The next one that pop up is Shenlong, and I'm honestly not familiar enough with him to offer a good solution there, but I agree that Cody is spot on of it is better to look at, okay, if this is an issue, because we don't have the data yet to for sure say this is a definable issue as opposed to we had a very good player have some very good games in the Masters. If it's an issue, how do we find the solution as opposed to it's broken and bad, break it further?
Well, and here's the other thing, too, to consider, and I thought this was important. So a friend of the show, Alex Drake, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was in the top 5 or 6 at UK
He was
Nationals.
number 4.
Yeah, he's 4th, right? So just off a podium.
I was honestly going to bring him up in this conversation because I talked to him the other day, and I'm sure you were about to say, he didn't take Shenlong.
Exactly. Right. So he plays 10 Thunders. He's an excellent player, placed 4th overall in a huge competitive field. Didn't bring Shenlong out once. And to a certain degree, I think we are arguing in a land of riches because in other game systems, this is system breaking, the conversations we're talking about. When stuff gets overpowered in other game systems like War Machine and 40K and in Fantasy, AOS, whatever the hell they call it now, it can break the entire game. Shenlong, let's pretend that he is twice as good as Sandeep was pre-nerf in 2E. He's still not going to break Malifaux. And that is because unlike other games, the quality of the player is going to be the biggest factor involved here. Now, I'm not saying that we leave everything the way it is. Don't make any changes. Everything is fine. We're always going to have to, and I like the sandpaper metaphor, we're always going to have to sand things down, these burrs as they pop up. The only other thing I'll put out there, and I got to tell you, when the first time that Matt sent over to me one of the drafts of the Gaining Ground Zero, and I saw how they addressed the quote-unquote Zoraida issue via the strategies. The first thing I told Matt was, I'm a little mad at you right now because I'm mad that I didn't think of this. And two, I thought it was incredibly elegant. I thought that it was very, very well done. But the bigger point I'm trying to make here is that there's a lot of levers to pull in 3. So one of the things that shocks me, and I'm not saying this is the answer, that shocks me in the discussions that I've been seeing about Shenlong is Shenlong the problem, or do we need to talk about Yasunori? Because I can guarantee if you look at the lists of the Shenlong list that played in the UK Nationals, you give me $1 every time Yasunori wasn't in the list, and I'll give you $1 every time he was, and guess who's going to come out ahead? So there's a lot of levers to pull, and the pools and everything, I think, really matter. Cody, do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important part. Well, first of all, I will wholeheartedly agree with you that what they did with GZ0 was very elegant. When I saw the document, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. I want to play Corrupted Idols right now. But to your point about the other systems, one of the best parts about Malifaux is that we can have niche models that act as little counters, and you can go deep diving in your entire faction and try and find little bitty picks that can be subtle little soft counters to things. In other game systems, you have to build a list, or you have to build multiple lists, or you have to deal with the opportunity cost of, you can only bring 6 models. But in Malifaux, that's like the best part of the game, is that you can go, if Shenlong's a problem, go play 20 games and try and figure out where your counter is, even if it's soft counter, and you may not realize where it is. I was thinking about Neverborn. I don't play Neverborn, but I was thinking Titania, she has the aura, 3 inches off from her, where you can't take severe damage. You can only take moderate. And without that, Shenlong is just a min 3 beater. Mm-hmm. So I don't have any evidence about that. But if you're a Neverborn player, play 20 games, figure it out. That's like what's awesome about Malifaux.
Well, and the other thing I talk about, and we talk about in the Reser chat all the time, is Shenlong is a nightmare for Resers until you put Albus on the table.
Oh, really?
And Albus can shut Shenlong down.
Yes, he can. I think that there's 2 things here, and I think that this is the consensus we can come to. One, it's still way too early to tell whether something is, because even this summer, earlier this summer, when they had the first big tournament out in Iowa, right, with the Schemes and Stones guys, they the rage was all Lynch and Yamlo. Right, because they're top 3 and so many Lynches were out there, and we haven't heard a peep since. Right. And so I think that there isn't enough time. And I think that a lot of it, too, is going to just be play and experience. And I think that Weird is taking a very good tact with trying to address within Gaining Grounds and trying to do as much possible now before they have to start doing what we all know is inevitable, which is there will be FAQs, there will be erratas, there will be things that will change some models that we use. But I think that Weird has been very, very careful about themselves, number one, having a knee-jerk reaction, but 2, changing a model just by popular demand, but more so based on things that they're seeing was not in their design process that we as players are going to catch. And I think that it's important for everybody to realize that those who did not participate in the beta, but especially a lot of us who did, is to remember that we were told even during beta, things are going to still not be perfect. It's as good as we can make it right now, but we could be playtesting for another year or 2 years and still not catch everything. And that's part of playing a living competitive game, is that some things are going to just rise to the top. And I will say that, Cody, your point is, I think, exactly true, that Control Masters, I think, should be the ones that are, if you're going based on just pure mechanics wise, should be the best because they should be the hardest to use, and skill level should be what comes into play most in that competitive sense.
One other thought I'd mention, in addition to as people play more games and find out those counters, we don't even have all the models out yet.
That's a good point too, Roman.
Yep. That's a huge point.
We haven't seen the complete game yet. Yep, no, I agree. The only last thing I'll tag on this before we move on to something else that's similar but a little bit different is that I'm not even going to hide it. I'm obviously a fanboy of both what Kyle and Matt have done and the other people that aren't that have participated in the creation of this game. So not only am I incredibly impressed with the third edition of this game, but I am what they did in Gaining Ground Zero. The way that they smartly addressed something in a very subtle way. And it wasn't just a Zoraida thing, too. If you really look at some of the changes that were made, there was a lot of burr sanding. I'm going to keep using that was done in a very elegant way. It makes me very optimistic about the first shift and nerf and power-ups we see. I like how their minds work, and I like the decision making they make. So we got an interesting question that's kind of related to, but on the other side of the coin of what we've been talking about with overpowered as far as masters. Jacob Williams, who's been a listener for a while and has brought questions in for us, I think you got something interesting to ask us.
Hello, Third Floor Warriors. This is Jacob from Indianapolis, and here are my questions for the expert panel. I've got two of them, one serious and one just for fun. First of all, there's a lot of talk about models being either overcosted or overpowered, like the Wonder Twins. And I've got a question about the opposite. What about underpowered models? What are some of the models that you all think need to either have their costs reduced or need a bump up to make them seen on the table more often? And more importantly, how do we get that over to weird? Because oftentimes it's easy to get OP models changed because people complain about them, but because it's easy to just not take an underpowered model, underpowered models tend to be left alone. So there's my serious question. And now for my fun question. My two favorite factions are Resurrectionist and Bayou. But what would, from a fluff standpoint, a Bayou/Resurrectionist master be like? I appreciate everyone's time. Hope everyone in the Malifaux community stays healthy and stays cool. And until next time, guys, take care.
So I'll answer the second question real quick for you, Jacob. The answer for the second question is simple. It's we kill Shenlong. So he becomes undead. So that takes care of the Reser part. And then we find a swine cursed that wears his skin, and then he can play in Bayou. So that answers that second question. But Cody, I want to focus more on the first question. Cody, do you think what are three models for you that you would love to see get a little bit of love? So models that you wish you could put on the table that just need a little bit of help before you can find a spot for them.
Yeah. First of all, Craig, I think you're spot on with Shenlong because his current sculpt is tiny and stupid looking, and I hate it. So he definitely already looks like a gremlin. So that's the real imbalance with Shenlong. Is like he's like punching you for 5 irreducible. And he looks so dumb. He looks like a Reaper model. Yeah. He's so ridiculous. Put him in Gremlins. And then second of all, he called us Third Floor Warriors. That's pretty dope. So again, in the comments, let Craig know what your third floor pronouns are. You know, are you a 30? Are you a floor head? Are you a third floor warrior? Let Craig know. He wants to know. and then for the serious part, three models that I think are underpowered. I think, well, two of them are easy because I own basically all of Outcast. I don't own two models, and that's because I see no reason to bring them. That's Bayou Smuggler. That's an easy one to talk about. It's just kind of irrelevant in both of its keywords. its point cost matches on with things that we have. It's a 6-slot model, which is a pretty competitive slot when prospectors exist.
Yeah.
So it falls into an opportunity cost sort of situation, and it just does nothing in that situation. Second is the Malifaux child. He's just kind of like whatever. He's just a 3-stone significant model who does nothing compelling.
Dude, I forgot that model existed because we haven't seen it anywhere.
It's such an opportunity to make like a compelling model. Like, right. He just does the most boring actions in your faction is all he can do.
Yeah.
It would be cool if he could if an enemy, because we don't have obeys anyway, so this would be balanced. But like if an enemy model kills him, he does like some huge pulse that gives out a buff. Everyone screams and they're like child murder or something. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity there that was kind of missed. And the third one that I would want buffed, not for balance reasons, but this the fact that it has no. Their role in the faction is sort of undefined, I think, and that's the Victorias themselves, like the whole master.
Yeah,
because they don't really. They're. I actually like them. They're kind of fun to play, but they just don't do anything that makes me want to put them on the table all the time. And I feel like there was such some missed opportunities to make them at least seem a little more fluffy. Because right now they're just men 3 beaters. It would be cool if they had like some ability, like when they move, they can ignore climbable terrain or something where they're like parkouring over stuff.
Well, something that gives them a place, right?
Yeah, they don't really have much of a place. They heal a lot is what they do, which is kind of just uninteresting, I think. And to that point, one of the big strengths of Malifaux is I'm trying to sell a bunch of my Florida friends on Malifaux right now. So like the number one thing I say is that unlike other minis game you're playing, these models play like they look in the fluff.
Yeah.
Hamlin is playing his pipes and his rats are punching you for 0, but it's giving you a blight. That's cool. But the Victorias are they're kind of not super interesting. So I would like to see them get something.
I just want to jump in about Jacob's fun question, and for my vote would be it would be a risen family member of Ma Tuckett who also wanted to rival her for being chef, and she killed him. He got resurrected. Your pick as to who did so, but he now is a master of the Resurrectionist faction and is known as Papa Legbone.
I'll tell you how he gets resurrected.
Okay, I'm going to cut this off right now. So for those of you that are listening, if you like this type of a discussion, and this is a fun thing to do, you got to listen to Steam Powered Scoundrels. These guys are the best at having these kind of super what if fluffy design type stuff. So I'm going to leave that corner of the podcasting world to them because I don't think anybody can beat Steam Powered for that type of thing. So we'll focus more on just what else is underpowered. What are 3 models, whether it be in your faction or not in your faction, that you wish got a little bit of love so that you could pull them out of the case more?
First one off the top of my head is at least of factions and that I play. Go with what's most familiar. Ruffians for McCabe. I really, and Alex and I both kind of said it in the episode. I just don't see why or when they'll be especially useful. I think one of their most useful abilities, period, is the fact that they're ruthless, except that their attack stats not, that great, and they don't even have like spike damage, really. I think it's like it's just a consistent low damage with their gang weapons. So, there's some potential there, but I still am not seeing why I would use them over other models, whether in keyword or out of keyword. And McCabe, of course, has very few in keyword right now, being a dual faction with explorers. So, so that's one. Another model that I think that I don't take too often that I would like to see a little bit more of is Horcats. I understand why they moved them to December. I don't really understand why either in December or even Marcus's crew, why you'd take them. I feel like they're just they seem to want to be split in what they do. They've got stealth, so they seem like they could be a good schemer, but if something ties them up, you're kind of screwed. If something even just charges them, they're going to die pretty easily and quickly. And they don't really have that great of attacks to justify, to me, all the melee focused front of card abilities that they have.
Right.
So that's another one that I think is a little bit underpowered and that I'd like to see changed. The last one I would probably have to go with I'm blanking on the name of them. Sorry. So again, going with December Acolytes, I think are a little overcosted for what they do. Any game that I've played with them, I have just wished that I had taken another silent one or something else. Tools for the Job is a great ability. Having 7 health is awesome, but when you literally have a 5 defense and no 8, like tonight, I took 2 attacks that I just couldn't stop, and this was at the top of the turn. I took 2 attacks on my December Acolyte, and it just died. Yeah, I never even got to activate it in the game, and I did not have. I had it deployed 6 inches above deployment in standard.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind too with giving this some love is you have to not only think about the model you want some love, but you also have to think about its competition, right? And the reality is, and this gets back to something Cody already talked about, is no matter what happens in the next 3 years, there's going to be the best model in the game, and there's going to be the worst model in the game, and that's just the nature, and it's a question of how we rotate it. And it's I'm interested to see what happens with Dead Man's Hand in the next year or two, and whether we're going to see that become a lever that's being pulled. Roman, how about your 3 models? What are 3 models you'd love to see get a little bit of love?
So, first thing, honestly, that comes to mind is not an Arcanist model, despite that being most of what I play. It's actually going to be the Terracotta Warrior from the otherwise fantastic, especially in the versatile land, 10 Thunders. And I think part of what the problem happened with them is they were so good in 2E.
So good.
I think they're one of the models. I think they're one of the models that are suffering from "you were too good before, go back in the box for a while" syndrome.
Yeah.
Because they really look like they're there as an oops button of, oh, my other model died and I'm going to get a copy of it back. Other than, unlike, I believe it's Titania's totem that also has that ability, her totem has the mask built in. Mm-hmm. They do not. Mm-hmm. And my issue with it is it looks like that's kind of set up so that you can't get any of the 10-stone enforcers back. Except that if you get the red Joker, you already have the masks. And that's what you would need to do that anyway. Anyway, enough about him. The other 2 I am going to jump back to Arcanist for, because they're what came to mind. Marcus's Order Initiates, it is a crime to compare how great those models look versus what they do on the
They're
table.
Such pretty sculpts.
They are, and I want them, I want to paint them, and then I want to sit them on a shelf until they are properly costed.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with what they do, but I think consistently most of his keyword is probably a stone or possibly even 2 in some cases too expensive because they're expecting Marcus to do nothing but throw around his upgrades. And the Order Initiates get the worst of it because they come in with an upgrade for free. Big problem being they're a stone cheaper than the Cerberus and the Mauler, and the Mauler and the Cerberus, for that extra stone, do tons more work.
Yeah.
And then finally, I have to harp on this again since the Colette deep dive. The performers make me sad. Or the showgirls, rather, pardon me. They are, again, either old or new, gorgeous models. They're fun to use, but right now they're a little confused. Their primary defenses were distracted back when distracted was full anti-focus on a damage as well as attack. Yep. And now it's just basically, I activated. I'm going to give you distracted, and you effectively have 1 attack worth of manipulative to deal with, but I've already activated, so you don't have to worry about it for the second.
Right.
Meanwhile, they have Lure to pull you closer to make it easier for you to hit them. there's a couple tweaks I would make to make them not necessarily tougher, but able to do their scheming without putting themselves in as much danger.
All right, so now that we have a good idea of what these guys think are models that need a little bit of love, and also kind of addressing some of the raging that we're seeing on A Weird Place, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back from this break, I'm going to ask a really quite a loaded question. I'm going to find out what each of these guys thinks makes a great Malifaux player. We'll be right back. So how much are 3 or 4 of these episodes worth to you a month? Third Floor Wars has a Patreon, and if you think they're worth $1, $5, $20 a month, swing by and become a patron. We have polls to decide the next episode of the pod, along with early releases of articles and podcasts. Everything we release goes out to everyone, but sometimes our patrons get a head start. The link is in the show notes, or just search for Third Floor Wars on patreon.com. Thanks for the support. Quick shout out to some of our newest patrons: Nathan Howe, Craig Chuba, Alice Dare Kunif, Decca Goody, Adam Rogers, Damian Guy, Owen Best, and Alan Foltz. Guys, we really appreciate your support. Thanks. So you see this question a lot. Usually it's, at the end of game night, people are like, what can I do to get better? And there's some obvious stuff out there. The first thing I tell people is a couple simple things. One, pick a keyword, pick a fixed list, play the hell out of it until you get so comfortable with it that you're actually playing Malifaux and not playing your crew. And the second part of it, which is just an extension, is you got to play a lot of games. You can watch every video, you can listen to every podcast, you can get involved in every discussion on the forums and in A Weird Place. But the only thing that's going to make you better is actually playing the game. But Robert, beyond the obvious, what are some things that people can do, or let's phrase it a different way. In your opinion, what takes somebody from tier 3 to tier 1? What are things that a top player does or thinks that some of the players that aren't winning as much may not?
So I think that's kind of a two-part question. And I think that it stems from the same thing, which is, one, you mentioned it, honestly, getting games in, as many games as possible. And I think Bynum actually had a great phrase they used of playing open kimono, finding those players that in your meta are better than you and asking them to be gracious enough to play openly with you and point out your mistakes and walk you through their decision making as well. But even outside of that, just get as many games in again with the same couple of masters, especially if you're starting out within the same faction. Get really, really good and comfortable with them so that you start seeing over time with that practice, you start seeing the game differently. You know what your models specifically are capable of. You start to learn which models you can take to tech for something, because the only time you're really going to truly experience something that you got to worry about is basically when you get gotcha'd. And that's not going to happen unless you play a variety of things, but stay consistent with practicing with those, same 2-3 masters. The other thing, I guess the second point of your question is, to me, what makes a really great Malifaux player, and it's something that Roman and I have talked a lot about, and I think Cody's also going to agree with this. The more I have played this edition, the more I realize that not only is control very important overall, but this entire version of the game, control is everywhere. It's in your action economy. It's in determining whether or not you're going to attack something. I talked a lot in the McCabe episode and the Raspy episode about the fact that even if it's not going to score me something, I will send, one of the 2 dragons, or I'll send McCabe, or I'll send the Ice Golem, or I'll send the Blessed of December after something that the opponent just has to deal with. And even outside of, the type of control that Terra is going to be putting out, or the type of control that Rasputina with her pillars are going to put out, control with just your models and throwing a problem at your opponent that they're going to have to deal with or waste activations on or waste cards on, I think is something that really I have seen separates the people who are successful in this edition versus those who are less so. And it's because they're starting to see the game from a different level, but they only see that over time and through the practice.
Yeah, and the phrasing that I always end up using, Robert, and I don't know whether I heard this or whether it's mine or not, but is you got to play enough so that you stop playing your crew and you start playing the game, because those are really two different things. And until you have a real familiarity with your crew, and to a certain degree, it's exposure, and have a familiarity with your opponent's crews, you're playing your own models, and that's not playing Malifaux. So I think that's excellent advice. How about you, Roman? What do you think makes a great Malifaux player?
I completely agree with Robert. Playing Control Masters is what makes you a great Malifaux player. That actually, to move beyond the flippancy, again, everything is control on some level. Even just killing, you're controlling by removing a certain amount of actions from your opponent from the game. To move beyond just models, the next step I would take is kind of inhabit this mental zen of Malifaux. Learn your tendencies so that you are not tilted as easily.
Yeah.
Learn to take that breath and take a step back going, okay, I just lost that model or I just lost that point. What can I do to either deny a point to get back on even footing or etc. That's a huge thing, is learning your own mind to be able to stand on even footing to move forward. Once you've done that, you start learning to read your opponent across the table. So you can kind of go, oh, maybe they have a bad hand this turn. Maybe this is a good turn to push into them. Or, hey, maybe they are not trying to come after me, so maybe they need cards for something. Maybe I should attack that hand. If they're focusing on one area of the board with several activations, maybe do an activation over in a corner to make them focus elsewhere and break their concentration, and then next activation jump back over there now that they're focused over in the corner. Or
figure out why they're focused there, right? Because they're giving you information.
Exactly. Learn to read yourself and then learn to read your opponent.
Yep. No, I think that's strong advice. And you know, it's a stupid thing, Roman, that was like a milestone for me in Malifaux that made me a bad player instead of the worst player, is learning to control my reactions. So something that I had the worst habit of doing is I would have a model come in and spank the crap out of me. Somehow, right? Kills a model, does a bunch of damage to my master, whatever. And my next activation was to retaliate against that activated model, which is completely irrational and stupid and really just bad play, because the model's already done its thing. You attacking it right now in no way is stopping what just happened before. And my ability just to control that stupid tendency, so learning yourself and controlling yourself, I think is very, very good advice. Cody, how about you?
Yeah, I think I have 3 general points of advice for someone who's in like the competent category and looking to get into the good category. The first one, and they're all not specific to Malifaux. They're specific to games in general, like tabletop games in general. The first one is on internet advice. When you're reading something online, when you see something on the forum, don't put any stock in a person's successes. There's no more flawed data point than how someone won a game. Put all of the weight in how that person failed. Like, that's the actual good point of information that you want going forward. You want to know how that person messed up. You want to know how they lost the game and what the big swinging point was. You don't want to know how they ran away with a stomping.
So I think I understand what you're saying, Cody, but talk a little bit more about that. What do you mean by, I need some more information. I think I know what you mean.
Like, to me, it's not when, like, if someone shows up in, like, let's say the Outcast Discord and they're like, oh, I won with, Hamlin. I beat, Sonya. It was really good. Like, that's not a meaningful data point. I don't think that, like, that makes Hamlin is good into Sonya. But if someone shows up and is like, Sonya tabled me turn 1. How do I beat this? Like, that's a more compelling data point and a thing that will make you go look at your cards and try and figure out, what is your answer? That's a more meaningful bit of information and process to make you a better player. Like for example, go look at the TFW battle reports. I think that you would get a lot more out of trying to identify the point and where the person lost the game than just fast forwarding the end and looking at the result.
Right.
Or where the red joker landed and then they one-shot that model. Right. I think there's more stock there.
Yeah, and it's something that I try to bring out in the interviews on those live streams and on our battle reports, Cody. Now I know where you're headed is, trying to figure out, now that we saw the game play, now that you're done, what do you think was the turning point? What was the crucial decision? Is there something that you could have done pregame that would have made a difference? Was there an activation that you think caused things to happen? So, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
When you really break it down, it's like this game is just sort of numbers, and it's pretty easy to identify the counters to certain things. So you can identify successes, but where people made failures, that's the more useful information. Yeah. My second point would be try to identify where you had disrespect plays. And by disrespect plays, I mean you did something assuming that your opponent is worse than you. So just if I can create a concrete example, let's say that you and I are playing Craig and you identify that I at least have more matchup knowledge, which is, to me, that's what skill is. I'm more skilled in this matchup because I know more about it.
Sure.
And you go in with Archie and you can either send Archie at my Leviticus or you can send him at the Necropunk. I think the disrespect play is to send him at Leviticus because what you're saying is, you might have more matchup knowledge or something like that, and I've assessed that I may be going uphill here, but I'm going to do the most disrespect thing and assume that I can kill the thing that you have the most control over. I have stones, I have cards, I have higher stats. In this case, I have a demise effect. But if you attack the Necropunk, I have less control over that. You have the higher stat. You have I don't have stones. So that's the situation where you should take what you're given rather than try and take everything.
Right. Yep.
So assessing where you made sort of disrespect plays, that especially comes into scheme selection. You didn't take prisoner because you didn't want to leave a single model on the board. You thought you were going to table him? That's huge disrespect. Assume that at least you're playing against yourself. And then the third thing I'll say is you can fix so many of your silly little positioning mistakes by playing against yourself. Confession time, I play against myself all the time. Nobody's
surprised to hear that, Cody.
Yeah, right. Hey, look at Craig over here. You really? Yeah, when I have a tournament coming up, I'll probably play the first turn of every round just because it's so important to see where your models need to unpack. So I think that's a very important way to fix your positioning mistakes. Where you just assume some hypothetical matchup where you didn't need to cross the enemy table line to score most of your schemes, but yet at the tournament you walk and charge. So you lost the resource because you were the one walking instead of the one who was just charging.
Yeah, I agree. And Cody, that advice about unpacking turn one as a practice thing is a big deal. It's one of the tools that has helped me a lot. Is take, you got a 3-round tournament coming up. Pick what keyword you're likely to bring into it and look at the deployment and play out turn one. It's going to make you a better player. So I think that's strong advice. Guys, we got a good question from another listener, Donald. So let's find out what Donald has to ask us.
Hi, this is Donald, and I have a question for the roundtable. So we've been hearing that a lot of the tournaments, each round is only going to about turn 3, and I'm curious if you think this is affecting the selection of keywords going into these tournaments, as we do know that some of the keywords are designed to be most efficient in gaining their points in those later 4 and 5 turns.
So, Roman, do you think the fact that we're not getting 5 turns in regularly at tournaments it is impacting some decision making, or should it be?
It's definitely impacting the decision making, but that's going to be something that's going to be the recognition that in any tournament, you are adding another resource to everything else that you're paying attention to when playing a game of Malifaux, and that is how much time you're using. So you're going to notice by end of turn 2 or 3, I only have an hour 45 minutes left. Unless we play real fast, I'm not getting to turn 5.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to say, well, let me go ahead and set up to get my last point turn 5. You're going to try and go for turn 4 at minimum. Whether or not that will change, I expect it will, because again, we're still fairly early as far as the game goes. We have new people coming in. Not everybody knows not everybody, as we were just talking about, has gotten to the point where they've stopped playing their crew and they're starting to play the game. And everybody's going to go through that a bit whenever they start to learn a new crew. So unless you really focus on off action and a handful of crews out of it, you're not going to be the fastest player unless you really focus on doing that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a little soapboxy here, so feel free to knock me off it whenever you feel like. So your initial question was, should we be considering time? At least, Craig, your initial question is like, should we be considering time? And I'm going to take a hard stance that no, you should not. You should not be considering time. And so my opinion on this situation is like an opinion that I stole from Travis on max value and sort of adapted for myself. When they talked about the discussion on that podcast is the general consensus, the general take home message was, I mean, you should just try and you should just finish the game. Like that should be the only, certain things come up, but you just need to try and finish the game. And I'm going to take it a step further and say that if you didn't finish your game, to get big picture, let's say there's a hierarchy of needs. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's Hyatt's hierarchy of needs for what makes a good Malifaux game. And up there in this first step is that we have, let's say, a fair game state. That's that we know each other rule. We're not cheating measurements, blah, 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 blah. In the fair game state section, there is that the game finished.
Yep.
The game is balanced on playing 5 turns. Full stop, because all the schemes end at 5 turns and stuff like that. So I think you can't even get to the point. Let's say the tier 2 is that I had fun. Tier 3 is you had fun. Tier 4 is how the developers, envisioning of internal balance came into affecting this game. If you don't get past step 1, you can't really interpret the game. I don't think. I almost think you should, if I can get a little spicy, I think you should feel bad if you didn't finish the game.
I agree.
You should feel bad.
Specifically in a tournament setting. If it's casual, it's one thing, but I will say that I had a lot of concerns during beta about the speed of the game. And Roman and I both chalked a lot of that up to the fact that there were, it was 2 factors. One, everybody's learning things still, right? And also, I did feel that, things are a lot harder to kill now, right? And so a lot of those schemes and strategies, I think it is still why Reckoning feels like a grind, and it's hard to get through some of those turns in Reckoning. That being said, at Slam at the Ram and at Gen Con, I had no issue getting through 5 turns in 2 hours at any single game. And I had 15 players at Slam at the Ram, and there were very few games that did not finish in 2 hours. And I think it was 2 hours, 15 minutes. Almost everybody still did. And I do think it comes down to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as we talk about resources, but honestly, the only thing that you should be thinking about as far as time is your own speed of play and the confidence with which you are making your decision-making and actions within that time frame.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll throw, I completely agree with what all 3 of you said. But Cody, I think you articulated it well, and Robert, you built on it, which is we got to get to 5 turns, kids. And until we do, we can't start talking about whether, I'm good at this game, I'm bad at this game, this is overpowered, this is underpowered, because in most of these competitive games right now, we're not even playing a full game yet. And I get it, guys. It's so easy to get stuck. It's so easy to be looking at the board state and say, how am I going to turn this around, or how am I going to close this out? But let's start getting to 5 turns first. And then we'll start micromanaging every decision we make.
It's especially inexcusable in turn 1. Like your turn
don't get me
1
started.
should not be more than 20 minutes. Like you should have one meaningful activation that turn. But so many tournaments I look up, it's like, why are we 45 minutes in and we're not in the second turn? Like have to speed it up.
No, I completely agree.
And I think a huge part of that is familiarity with your models. And it comes down to what all of us have been saying, and other guests on the show have been saying, which is get games in, get the experience, and really learn those 2-3 masters within your faction that you decide to play competitively to really get them down. Because like Cody said, you should have a quick turn 1 and honestly turn 2, despite wrenches thrown in the gears. You should be able to figure out, knowing what your models are capable of, how to get out of some of those binds.
Yeah, and where you've got a lot of work to do, and this is not a criticism. I mean, we're all there, right? We all are at different points in this game. So if I'm describing you, I'm not criticizing you, but it should not take you a long time to figure out the next model to activate. If you're spending a lot of time figuring out which model you're going to activate next, you've got a ways to go. And learning your crew. That should be something that and you know it pretty quick, because you know the roles that your models play. And regardless of what the situation is, you know how to react. And you're not going to know that till you know your crew. So I think, I think I'm with you guys completely on that. So guys, let's take a quick break. When we get back from the break, it's a segment that I purposely saved to last because I think it's really interesting. I want to talk about resource management. So we'll be right back. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring, along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast. So something, we talked a little bit about how kind of everything is control in Malifaux, and I think you can make a strong argument that's true. I'll make another argument, and that's everything is resource management in this game. It's a game of control and resource management. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, there's obvious resources in the game. So your control hand is a resource. The number of stones you have is a resource. The number of pass tokens you have is a resource. The number of models you have, which means the number of actions you have, are a resource. Roman, let's start with you. How do you approach, not only managing these resources, but is there some less obvious resources that people either don't think about or don't realize they're resources that need management?
There are so many more resources. There are at least like 3 more levels down of resources from that. And you have to learn to manage the ones you can see first before you can really start to see what's below that. And they're going to change depending on the crew, depending on the pool. Some crews are going to care more about how many cards they have in hand. Some other crews aren't, because they draw a whole other hand. Hello, Zoraida. Or draw bit by bit a whole other hand. Hello, Lucius. Others are going to care really a lot about how many stones they have, because they need them for summoning, for specific suits, etc. Those summoners won't care so much about models because they can bring more of them in. Mm-hmm. Arcanists aren't going to care so much about stones because we mine them.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
But the next level down, I usually look at it as, here's your suits. So that kind of combines 2 different obvious resources of you have suits, either what is in your hand or potentially your deck if you have a way of looking through there, or how many stones you have and where you need those suits to go. So that's a little bit trickier to manage because you're pulling it from a couple different spots. Mm-hmm. And actually a third one I didn't mention of any that are built in. So if you have a built-in trigger, that's a suit you can count on, but maybe you need 2 suits for something. If you have the first mate leaping, he needs a suit for that, but then he also needs another suit to hit somebody for free at the end of it. So you have to spend a stone there as well as a card. Jumping off of that, the next one is going to be card manipulation. That can be in a couple different forms. You have drawing cards, you have cycling cards, you have looking for other cards in your deck via intuition, or tools for the job, which means you have to pay attention to your discard pile. Movement even itself is a resource, and that's all over the place. We've talked in this episode, not much, but in other episodes, I think all of us have talked about movement shenanigans and the importance of essentially not having to walk if you don't have to, because it gets you more actions. Hey, look, another resource that you can use for other things. Another one that all these kind of, especially the movement feeds into, is your area of influence. So that can be your engagement. That could be the total threat area, whether it's leap, walk, charge, or walk, charge, or etc. Or maybe focus and shoot with a sniper with their ridiculous 24-inch range when they do that. All of those are kind of the next level down. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, the next one I look into is, now that you know the next level down, how do you deny not only the resources you can see your opponent has, but also the next level down for theirs as well? So that's where you start using that area of influence. If I engage you, you can't, barring don't mind me, interact. Right. Even if you walk away, you've disengaged. You can't do that. So I'm effectively denying your use of an action to score you points. And that is a huge resource.
Yeah, you're right, Roman. And I'll tell you, one of the big points I think for people to take away about what you just shared there is you can't manage any of this if you're not aware of it. I'll just build off one of your excellent points, which is suits. If you saw the hand management video that Ray put out on our YouTube channel, and I'll put a link in the show notes, it's something that he talks about as well. If you don't have an awareness of what suits you're hungry for based on what you need accomplished that turn, and if you're not aware of it, then you're not managing it, and you end up being the player that goes, I just couldn't flip good cards, or I couldn't get a good control hand. When in reality, that wasn't the issue. The issue was you didn't even know there was a resource that you needed to manage, and as a result, you didn't manage it.
Precisely.
Yep. How about you, Robert? Kind of what are your thoughts on not only just the obvious resource management, but some of that second level stuff that Roman touched on?
Sure. So number one, and I think it's pretty apparent to listeners now, Roman and I are in the same meta. He and I do a lot of chatting about Malifaux. So everything that he listed was kind of stuff that he and I've kind of chatted about for a long time. He stole from you. Oh, no. Collaboration.
I've never seen this man before in my life. I don't know who he is.
But one thing I will say is, it's a couple things. One, those obvious resources, you need to master those first before you can really start thinking about the other stuff. The other thing is, and Roman touched upon this a little bit and talked briefly, was I view action economy, getting the most out of your actions and the most actions that you can that are going to have a positive effect on the game state out of your models is managing a resource. And it's beyond what I would say the obvious resources are. Models equal 2 activations plus possible bonus action. But really, when you look at a model, let's say like Archie, right? Well, Archie, has so many more built-in resources on him because one, he's got leap. So that's essentially a free movement action, right?
With a built-in suit.
With a built-in suit, right? Yep. So and a relatively low card that you potentially would have to cheat to get the leap, right?
Yep.
So then you also have on his card, for instance, you have his he's a min 3 beater, and he also has flurry, right? So essentially, if you play your cards right, and if you do the proper setup, you can end up getting 4 actions out of Archie in one turn and 1 activation, right? And this is not even thinking about the fact that honestly, a lot of your front of card abilities are resources that you have to manage, because it's one thing to say that, okay, I have models, I have activations, right? But when I take a look at what makes somebody like Lynch or so effective, right? He's got Rig the Deck, right? So he's cycling through cards in his hand and the deck. His crew also can actually have a shocking amount of terrifying models.
Yep.
That he can then throw at the enemy, and playing into what Roman's talking about, denying your opponent while also gaining you something, right? You start attacking your opponent's resources. Things like terrifying are amazing because you're forcing the opponent to make another flip that they possibly have to cheat, to then go in and attack you on another flip that they might have to cheat, right? So you're cycling through their cards, you're cycling through potentially stones if they're trying to really get some type of trigger off that they need to do. You're depleting their resources just by having the right model in the right place because of that front of card ability.
Yeah, it's like terrifying in the same way, Robert, is shockwaves.
Yes, and actually I was going to bring them up because shockwaves, honestly, to me, are one of the sneakiest but best resources for trying to deplete your opponent's hand. And because you get those shockwaves in, and similar to what, Alex and I talked about with the McCabe episode, right? McCabe's effectiveness in combat is that he's draining the opponent's hands with all of his pulses, right? Well, one shockwave, depending on the pulse's reach, can affect anywhere between 3 and 5 models, depending on where you've got them clumped up. And so many shockwaves have the trigger, the Cataclysm trigger, sometimes built in, sometimes not, to then drop another shockwave. So you're again extending your reach and extending the action economy of your models by just one trigger to then deplete your opponent of resources. So really, once you start recognizing those control hand, those stones, past tokens models, once you start getting a handle of that, you can start looking deeper and deeper at what do your models do that really, really screw with the opponent to really deny them their resources.
Yeah, I like your approach, Robert. So it's kind of like step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1 is the obvious resources. Learn to manage them. Step 2 is understanding the more subtle resources, which Roman touched on and you built off of. And once you have control over those 2 things, then you can go to 3, which is, okay, I've got my resource management under control. Now I'm going to go screw with yours. And that wins you games. So I like that a lot. Roman, do you have anything to add?
There was one other thing that is both an obvious resource and has its own set of less obvious resources, and I wanted to bring it up, especially with the outcry after Gaining Grounds 0 came out, declaring that you should have 40 to 50% table coverage, and that's my friend Terrain.
Yep.
Yes.
Terrain is a resource. It is not only just something for you to hide behind and hopefully slow your opponent's models down by using it well, but when you see that table, you now have a resource of knowledge to go, oh, there's a lot of unimpeded, or there's a lot of severe here. I should bring a bunch of unimpeded so that my resources of actions for movement are more useful than my opponent's. If there's a lot of buildings, bring flight or leap for the same reason. Same idea.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Roman, this kind of triggers me a little bit because I get mad at both camps. So the camps that say, there's too much terrain and 40% is ridiculous and how dumb is that? Quick shout out whoever wrote the Waldo Weekly that made the joke about putting all the furniture in the corner and setting on fire. I don't know who that was, but I owe you a beer. Those people tick me off. And the other people that tick me off are the people that say, well, you don't have enough terrain on the board. That's not enough terrain. And that's not how Malifaux is designed. Here's my bottom line on that, which is too few players are looking at the terrain board and it's impacting their list. And whether the board is light on terrain or heavy on terrain, you need to figure that out before you pick your keyword, before you start building your lists, before you even look at the pool. So I think, Roman, that's an excellent point.
So one other thing that I wanted to add to this was the fact that we talked earlier about time, right? And getting playing quickly and getting into the 5 turns. I honestly, the more I play, think that your own pace of play is a resource. Nothing throws your opponent off. And I'm not saying that I want to tilt opponents, but nothing throws your opponent off more than you having kind of an unbridled confidence in quickly doing your actions turn 1 and deep into turn 2. When you are confident and know what you're doing, and again, it comes back into that practice, comes back into getting that experience, learning your crew so that you can learn how to play the game. And even what you said, Craig, about staying away from retaliatory actions that aren't going to score you points, right? Learning how to manage your own time is another resource in the game that I think a lot of players don't necessarily think about a lot in competitive play as much as they should. And it is something that it doesn't even matter if it's Malifaux, just in a lot of types of competitive games, learning how to manage your time and get certain actions, certain things that you need to do for setup down like clockwork so that you have more time to think through some of those stickier situations.
I agree, Robert. And I'm going to come off a little snarky, but I'm going to mean it anyway, is make a decision. Make the play. You're not Deep Blue. This isn't, you're not Kasparov. Just make the play. You're going to learn more by making the play and it being the wrong play by you then spending 5 minutes deciding what to do, and we play 2 turns. So yeah, I completely agree, Robert. How about you, Cody? What are your thoughts on resource management?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Robert was talking about sort of leads into managing your expectations as a resource too. Like when he was talking about terrifying, when you fail a terrifying check, what you didn't lose a severe damage flip. You didn't lose the upside of your potential action. You lost the 4 out of your deck. That was the potential. That was your terrifying flip. That's what you actually missed out on. That's the resource that you missed. So I think a lot of this discussion about managing your resources leads to, like you said, managing your expectations of your time and what you can get done. Like you should be looking at your hand and the board state at the very beginning of the game, being like, okay, my 2 severes, they go here and here. My moderate goes here. This other moderate I can use to get a negative on a damage flip. You shouldn't be every time you take an attack like, oh, I'm going to hit 3. Oh, Archie whiffed. Yep. You should have some expectations, and that's a general resource too.
So one of the people that I used to play a lot in 2nd edition before he moved was Alex Schmidt, and there was a couple things Alex did that took me off guard at first. One of them if you ever listen to Max Value, you hear the robot joke a lot. Like he would play and the worst thing would happen, like the worst flip would happen, and he'd be like, "Okay, your activation, I'm done." And or he would spike the red joker and kill your master. He'd be like, "And that's my end of activation. Your turn." It was astounding to watch because he would, and I learned from it, which is getting to the expectations resource, Cody, which is what I'm building off here is, if you're going to go up against a terrifying model, you know what? If your expectation is that I'm going to get lucky and hit both those terrifyings off the top of the deck, you're probably going to have a bad day. So go into it and go, you know what? Either I'm ready to do this or I'm not to do this. If I'm relying on the top deck and I'm hope to get lucky because my control hand's shit, then manage that expectation that, if it's terrifying 12, I'm probably only going to be able to get one of these through. And if I'm going to flip a double negative, I'm going to hit min, or I've increased my chances of hitting black joker. I think that's interesting, Cody, that concept of managing expectations.
Yeah, I think, these guys covered like a lot of these. I don't really have much else to say about different types of resources. But one other thing, if I could take a step back to list writing, is when thinking about resources, is think about the opportunity cost you're paying for certain abilities, because I see a lot of people overrating abilities in the dojo because of that opportunity to do this, and this that requires, 3 target numbers and an opponent that's asleep at the wheel
and 4 suits.
Yeah, right. So, and a lot of time when you sit down at the table, you're like, oh, I had all this great plan, but it's completely impossible because we're playing wedge and there's a house at the front of my wedge. Like, now nothing's within 3 of everything else. So really think about the opportunity, what you're paying in stones for a potential thing that you just can't do because the deployment forces you to split.
No, I agree. Well, gentlemen, this was great. Another really good roundtable, and I appreciate the 3 of you taking the time. Before we head out real quick, Robert, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I do. So in January, it's January 30th, I believe, to January 31st to February 2nd, we will be hosting a miniatures gaming convention here in Indianapolis. It's called Indie Storm. There's going to be 3 days of events starting on that Friday, the January 31st. We will be having a 50 Soulstone Gaining Rounds tournament on that Saturday. Right now it's awesome. 3 rounds, depending on how many players we get. I'm planning right now for it to be 16 to 20. If we get more, I will expand it and probably just cancel one of the other events. But we've got the new Enforcer Brawl, which is all out brawl. And a lot of fun. And then Henchman Hardcore as well. So it's going to be a lot of great prize support, trophies, the whole shebang. If you are going to Adepticon, it's a great place to, close by to Illinois to come and get some practice in before having to go to the big main event out there in Illinois. So hope to see you there.
Yeah, and I'll have a link to it, Robert, in the show notes for everybody. How about you, Robin?
Well, I have my usual 2 spots over on the Schemes and Stones blog. I've been taking a break from it for a week or 3 now because of some busy life happenings, but I will be returning to my Monday Model articles over there.
Good. I've been missing it, so it makes me happy.
Excellent. Glad to hear. I will be returning there. We will also have some new Steam-powered Scoundrels coming up shortly. Doug has had a small child person enter the life, and that has understandably slowed us down there, but we will be coming back. And I also just wanted to give a quick shout out, meant to do this at the beginning of the resource management, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to Michael Matthews, the henchman in St. Louis, who is the reason that I went from level obvious to level 2 on realizing those after several very excellent conversations with him.
Nice. How about you, Cody? Are you going to plug Third Floor Warriors or Floorheads?
So I'll donate my my plug to TFW Patreon.
Oh, thanks, man.
So go on there, subscribe, and then you can message Craig, and he has to look at it because he's a filthy pay pig who took your dollar. So I want you to go on there, subscribe, and I want you to ship Shipman. That's Shipman. Let him know which Arcanist character would make the best relationship with us.
Right? How many dollars per month are they getting before Craig has to play Arcanists?
So on the live stream, I don't remember who it was. Someone asked how much, what level do we have to reach on the Patreon before I will do a live stream of me playing Arcanists? And because I was about 3 Heinekens in at that time on the live stream, I said, if we can get to $300, the $300 mark, which we're over halfway there, you will see me field a fully painted Arcanist model 50 Soulstone game on the live stream.
One of us.
Boy.
I'm going to have to go mine some fresh Soulstones to contribute to that now, Craig.
That's funny. No, I appreciate that, Cody. Well, guys, this is not the last time any of you will be on the show. So I look forward to having you back on here. And I also appreciate everybody that listened. Have a good night. Be sure to check out our shop on thirdfloorwars.com for the latest gaming apparel and gear. While you're there, check out how the USFO Tour is shaping up. How does your conference compare to the others in the United States? Where do you rank nationally? Get those models built, painted, and on the table so we can see you at the US Masters Invitational in October of 2020. Also, rate and write a review on this podcast for us. It really helps us find people almost as cool as you are. Thanks for listening. Howdy friend, Craig here. Is this episode making you realize you need to buy some models? Gadzooks Gaming is my favorite online retailer because of their large selection, killer prices, and great customer service. Don't you hate buying an entire crew box when you only need one model? Gadzooks sells crew box models individually and saves you a ton of money. They even have free shipping to the US and Canada if you spend $100 or more. Swing by gadzooksgaming.com and make sure you tell them Craig from the third floor sent you. All the details are in the show notes. So I think I'm going to go Roman, Robert, and then we'll finish with you, Cody. That way, if we run long, we can just drop you and nobody will notice.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'll bring us back. All right. That's going to be fun to edit.
Yeah. This whole episode, dude. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. And of course, it's the one on Patreon that got voted as the one they want next. Well, guess what, kids? It ain't coming next. Yeah, no, I agree. So, guys, I just realized I fucked up. I was supposed to kick this off with Jacob Williams' question. So, Cody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Jacob Williams' question and toss it to you. And then I'm going to bring Robert and Roman in via the magic of editing to follow you, but allow you to kind of build off of what Jacob asks. And then it'll make it easy for Robert and Roman's comments to edit in fine. I just realized I forgot to do it. So do you guys want to hear, before we bring it back in, do you want to hear my Sophie's choice? Someone walks up to me and says, Craig, you could either make soulstone miners no longer exist or spider swarms. What are you picking? It's like, oh shit, that ain't easy, man. Bueno, dudes.
I had to resist chiming in about soulstone miners like the last 4 minutes.
Oh god, it's such.
Oh yeah, Outflank. It's a good scheme for Arcadius.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really. Oh, really? That's,
Wait,
nice hot take. The thing about Steve with me is that he's just good. He's a good broadcaster. I mean, he's just good radio. But he looks at the game a little bit different, which just makes for an interesting episode.
Absolutely.
I think new players learn from him and experienced players. Yeah,
what her limitations are, and it comes down to like when I'm approaching the pool. Like,
if you think in any way that makes me think, Robert, that swarms aren't stupid, then you're wrong.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I think that they're
stupid,
ridiculous.
Oh, good discussion, boys.
Yeah, that was good. You guys are smart. I'm gonna go pee. Way before that. Way before.
Was it? Oh, never mind.
She's 7 months old.
Is she really? Good Lord. I didn't realize that.
The only reason I'm doing well in Malifaux is like that pre-baby mania phase where I was just like reading cards and holding my daughter.